Hi folks, Casual Dad here with another Warhammer Combat Cards update. This time we are at the very end of the ladder season. Let me see how much time we have left. Looking at less than a week here. This will wrap up at the end of the week, which is kind of an unusual time because it is around the holidays. I just wanted to do a quick update on the ladder. So Tara, I'm going for that top 6% here, ideally to get within that 99 position to get this free card, just cause. Just because I find that those are kind of the most challenging and rewarding games to play, so I'm just going to play a few games here. I was actually in the top 6% and then pushed it to get just a couple more wins, lost dramatically, and then ended up in a downward slide, so I'm back in the top 10%. I'm fairly comfortably in the top 10%, kind of in the middle range. And at this point in the ladder season, these do kind of spread out a little bit. So you'll see the actual number of players in each ranking actually go up a little bit. Top 6% and below, that is. And so I will just play some games. Now, what you're going to see is probably me lose quite a bit. And you're going to see some of my most competitive decks and how I've run them up. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. So I'm going for around the 13,000 mark, give or take, and I'll keep track of that as we go through. And just to check my ladder status here. Still have kind of the same familiar 4 decks. One thing that's interesting, I'm going to go ahead and start with this. My Tyrannid deck, my usual standby one, has just not been able to punch through some of the newer cards, especially the big scary epic and legendaries that gain their new traits and have been a lot more effective than I expected. And I've been particularly impressed with how impactful even 1 or 2 cards can be in a deck. So I expected them to make a splash, but they've actually shut down my entire competitive meta. So yeah, we'll see how this goes. On that note, though, I'm used to running the Tervigon. The Tervigon is my favorite Tyrannid Warlord, just because it's really, really good at just kind of attrition, just going through and just not dying. But where that fails completely is it also has to do damage, and some decks, especially this is a great example, I'm looking at Logan himself, because of his melee overflow where he can just deal extra damage beyond the original target. You don't get as much benefit from that free card from the Tervigon, and he can just chainsaw right through it. And some of the newer cards gaining shields, gaining fear, really, really makes a difference in terms of their durability throughout the game. So I was just not punching through and was just losing at a much higher rate than I expected much earlier. So, just to kind of throw a wrench in the works, I pulled out my weakest Tyrannid Warlord, which is the Parasite of Mortrex. And now the Parasite has an ability where when it does melee damage to a card, it's the first time it deals melee damage to an enemy card, or the first time that enemy card takes melee damage, it becomes infested. The initial attack does less damage, you do half damage on that attack, but then once an infested card is killed, and it doesn't have to be melee attack, it's just however it dies, it does 40% of its base wounds to adjacent cards. Now, I found this to be really, really powerful against some of these beefier new cards. It takes a while to take them down, but when you take them down, you get the additional benefit of they actually do damage beyond the card itself, which is really helpful in punching through some of these. Because I found I was spending a lot of time taking down really high-powered cards, and when I did, it just didn't have the impact on the adjacent cards, whereas this will have a significant impact. You can see there was even a cascade where the kill on the right ended up finishing off the guy in the middle, which ended up hitting the guy on the right pretty hard. Now here's one of those cards that's been particularly powerful. I'm going to go ahead and see if we can pull off another cascade here. And now the Parasite has been my weakest for a long time, just for a variety of reasons, because I didn't really get it. But I've kind of settled on, it turns out what I was missing is that you just need to hit things really, really, really hard. So these 2 cards, the Death Leaper is absolutely exceptional in this, especially with that Furious Charge, applying that infestation early, and then that Outflank giving you an extra boost, just having a really, really high melee stat and decent hit points for the cost. Like, the Death Leaper is really good, but the Trigon, or Moloch, excuse me, is the real top-notch beastie in this deck, just being so beefy, having that death blow. He can be really impactful both before and after he dies. And now this is a really good one to highlight, because one of the cards I found to be the most surprising is Mephiston. Getting that fear has just been completely insane in how powerful that card is in this. And this is going to go really badly. I'm going to lose this. This is a bad matchup. So that's actually kind of why I wanted to do some of these laddering games, because this is I'm seeing very different things, and they are really giving me a much harder time than usual. I'm still in the top 10%, which I'm proud of, but I'm definitely struggling a bit more than I usually do, including about to pretty comfortably lose this game. And now you saw a lot of my cascading death blows go off. If this was close, if I'd weakened those cards enough, that could have made all the difference. Also another bonus, my Parasite is only level 4 and only has that rank 1 trait. But yeah, so this was a tough match, and I'm going to lose a bunch of points for this one, but we're going to do it anyway. A little honorable joust. That's an X-Wing Miniatures turn, by the way. The honorable joust is just if, rather than kind of dancing around in the rocks, you just go in for a fight and have it dice it out. Okay, so that went about as badly as expected, but I have been surprised that the Parasite is much more powerful than I'd originally thought. I'm going to try that again and see if I can get it. Well, I'm going to rotate through. So that was Tyranids. Next up is Servants. I have been running with Greyfax, and I was called out in the comments on my Greyfax video that I didn't lose with her, so let's go ahead and see if I can get a loss in here. And I'm playing with my kind of standard Psychic deck. A lot of the decks I'm seeing are not using Psychic, even the few Acheran decks, and I've seen a lot less Acheran this season. Even the few Acheran decks I'm seeing haven't, hey, right on cue, haven't always had Psychers. One of the most powerful ones I saw was pure melee, and I believe I lost to that one. I also wanted to draw attention to the trophy counts. If you're going to go for the top 6%, you want to have all of your top 4 faction trophies in around the 3K range, around 3,300, give or take. Which is what I'm at right now, but I'm up against decks that are similar. One thing that's especially tough about the final week is some of the decks you face are really, really powerful, but also laddering is very difficult. So for a lot of players, you'll run into very scary decks that are underrated. So they're actually weaker. So they are potentially 3K decks that just haven't been played enough to get that high, and so they're very tough matchups, but then if you lose to them, they also have a bigger penalty in terms of your score. So if I lose to this guy, I'm rated higher, so I will take a bigger penalty than I would if this deck was rated probably correctly. And that's what I'm seeing quite a bit at this point, where players have played to where they want to be, they're in Terra, they're done, they're good, but they played decks that could easily have gone higher, and are, again, those tough matchups. So that's what we're seeing here in a number of these. This one may be appropriately rated. It really depends on the next few cards we see. Because some of the stuff... Nice. Oh yeah, that's what we want. And I considered doing melee there. If melee had taken him out, that would have let me have a small psychic buff for my next turn. And I don't know what he's going to drop, so it'd be good. Okay. And there he is. So usually in an Acheran deck, I think I did this in my kind of Acheran guide, you usually expect to see both Togurius and Njal, the really scary Space Marine Psychers, especially because Togurius has that shield. He can be very difficult to deal with. I am going to go ahead and get a little bit weird. And especially in this is a really bad matchup because I don't want to do Psychic. I don't want to do Psychic because I'm going to get just hammered by that Togurius over there. I've got both of my Psionic Blast cards down, so I'll clear those shields quickly. Oh, another taunt. And there's Njal. Yuck. Okay, so that's a fairly standard Acheran deck. Even in the current meta, Acheran is very scary. There's a very good chance that this guy could, fairly comfortably, be reaching... Well, he already is at 3K. Yeah, so this guy's rated appropriately. This is a very challenging matchup, but he's lower rated than I am, so I'm going to take penalties for losing this, which I do actually expect to lose this, just to go ahead and say it. Just that Acheran ability is incredibly powerful, and that on top of the kind of oppressive power of Njal and Togurius, even before their last season buffs. Like, this is a very difficult matchup for me. And I know there are a lot of decks out there that can handle that, especially those Logan decks that are really rocking the meta right now, because that overflow damage punches through shields for Togurius and can do the extra 5 damage to finish off cards that were not at full health. And now here, I want to go ahead and shoot him. Which is a real bummer. That's a high-level Acheran, yeah. So I'm taking a real beating back for that. But you can see how I've got enough Psychic on the table, and he's got his Warlord on the table, he doesn't want to hit me back with Psychic, but I just didn't have the bodyguards to pull this out. So I can kill him, but I will almost die in return, and he's going to have his extra life. Irritating. Alright, so this is kind of what I've been hitting. Here's that losing streak. So I'm going to try the sort of standard decks that I've done in the past to get to that sort of 3k. If I end up out of the top 10%, that's alright. It's not the biggest deal. But I wanted to go ahead and demonstrate this. And a couple quick notes. This is actually why I don't usually play in the final week of the ladder season, because it's very, very challenging. You see the most powerful decks are very highly rated, and so they're extremely difficult to beat. But you see a lot of decks that are actually underrated. So they haven't played to the peak of their ability, and so you hit them and take really big penalties for losing to them. I'm going to go ahead and switch to Orcs, and then I'll try Eldar. I had a little bit of a winning streak with this one, now that I retooled it again, and we'll see how it goes. So this is my kind of standard Mozrog deck that you saw in the past. But yeah, so this is kind of why I don't play at this part of the season. The biggest reason being when you're kind of at the peak of your ability, where your decks kind of hit a win-loss ratio of, say, 2 to 1. That's kind of the peak of where you can compete reasonably in any reasonable amount of time. You're still progressing, usually, but you're taking such a penalty for those losses that you're barely progressing. And sometimes you may actually go backwards, even if it's 2 wins to 1 loss. Ugh. That's an awful matchup. Okay. Artemis' ability, again, is if he plays a card, one of your cards on the table and automatically takes, 20% damage, and it's based on its starting wounds. So the more powerful your card is, the harder of a hit it's going to take. Kind of a nice perk there is that the change to Medicae, this healing trait, going last, is actually really helpful here, so I could hold my most powerful cards to the last, and avoid taking the massive hit from Artemis' ability. And the reason I went ugh and this is a bad match is, of course, because I have a small number of cards in this deck, and they're generally very high hit points, which is what you get with Mozrog. And so Artemis' ability is going to hit me really hard. The good news, though, is that Artemis himself doesn't have that double life thing, doesn't have the overflow damage, so in terms of a Space Marine Warlord, he's nowhere near as scary as some of the others you may see. Even with y'all. There's Tigurius, excuse me. That's also good because you can see that Tigurius is not anywhere near as high level as the last one I fought, so his psychic damage is not as impressive. So I'm just going to wail on him. I've got Makari over here, who's just wonderful because he passive does a range debuff. So if I go up against a Badrukk, I can automatically debuff his stuff. He's also got a lot of hit points, is very cheap, and has that rank 3 Inspire to make my cards that much more powerful. I mentioned this is a little bit of a retool of my Mozrog deck. My kind of classic one and a weird rework I did both didn't work, so I've gone back to kind of the basics. I've got my Squigoth and then my Deaf Dread in here to be really, really hard-hitting and just be extremely durable. They benefit a lot from Mozrog's ability, where every time they do a melee attack, they heal back based on a percent of their starting health. Because they have a lot of health to start with, they heal significantly over the course of the game, and then because they have Enrage, they become really hard-hitting fairly quickly. And if I can keep them live to the end game, which I usually can, at least one of them, they then end up doing so much damage that they can finish off a game that would otherwise be very difficult to win. So in some of the other variants of this, I tried doing a larger deck where I had more cards, but really, really missed that Enrage. Enrage does such a dramatic difference throughout the course of a game. And especially here, like doing melee against Tigurius, he's hitting me back with Psychic a lot, which it hurts. But his melee attacks are so flimsy that I'm healing a lot on my turns, and I'm able to charge up that. Like this gained, I think, 40 damage in the past 2 turns. And I still need to be careful because I don't really know what he's going to drop after Tigurius, and it may be something really nasty. Plus, Artemis' ability itself, if I get unlucky and that lands on the Squigoth, it's going to do significant damage very quickly. Oh, look. If he does, so he's got a big charged up melee. If he does melee here, that'll hurt. Yeah, of course. Expected, just because he had the melee charge going. The AI will usually go for a pretty hefty kill if it has the opportunity to take down something big like that. I'm going to go ahead and start working on this guy. I'm probably going to regret that because that will not take down shields on this dude. But I need to take down Njal. Njal's a little bit more challenging in some ways than Tigurius. You can kill him faster because he doesn't have the shields, but he does have very high hit points, and his melee attack is much higher. But I should be able to two-hit this guy without... Yeah, and that taunt really saved my butt there. Good. Okay, cool. And taunt is still up, which is awesome. I still have a bunch of health in my Death Dread. We're going to see in a minute. I've been seeing a lot of Artemis this season, and I mentioned that he was going to probably be more impactful than he has been. And the big reason why is he gained the secondary trait of the special target acquired that can target a Warlord. He's already kind of a headhunter Warlord where he's particularly good at going toe-to-toe with some of the beefier Warlords, but that's always been a little bit weaker because his stats are decent, but they're not really good enough to stand up to something like a Swarmlord or a Ghazghkull, like a truly scary toe-to-toe Warlord. Where he gained some extra oomph in that, though, is that in the latest update, he gained the target acquired trait for Warlords. So if he plays on the board and your Warlord is already on the board, he will target your Warlord, and then all of his bodyguards will also attack your Warlord. So one of the strategies against Artemis was killing enough to pull Artemis himself, and then usually you had enough punch to take him down just one-on-one, Warlord to Warlord. But it's much harder when everything on his side of the board is all targeting your Warlord at once, and I'm about to lose this one too because of exactly that. So I could maybe handle Artemis himself. I cannot handle Artemis. He's low level enough. Okay. So he's not high. Okay, so that's good. No, but his ability just killed me outright. There we go. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so that's 0 for 3, 3 losses. I'm going to do my final match here. And I'm just going to go ahead and switch back to my Lelith attack. Lelith. However you want to say it. Blah, blah, tongue twister. Extremely powerful deck. In the past, I could get this deck almost to 4K without any difficulty. I did that wrong. Let me pull this guy in here. Really, really good just with the redeploy and the sheer volume of damage you can put out. Gained significantly because of the legendary card ability increases that we kind of talked about before. Biggest ones being that the Crimson Hunter now attacks on the drop, and the Solitaire now attacks on the drop. Super powerful upgrades, especially for Lelith's ability, where if a card gets a kill, goes back to your hand, you can redeploy it without it taking any damage. But the meta changes I keep talking about have really held her back. Like, some significant cards are just that much more durable, to the point where she's just held back a lot, where she's still very powerful, but she's not getting the same level of... Go ahead and pop that guy in there. She's just not getting the same level of board clear that I would expect from her, even with the buffs that we just talked about. She's still very fast, tends to go first, so you can see my Medicae pulled. I hit this guy already. This is nice going up against a Helbrecht deck, because again, it's a Space Marine deck where he doesn't have that extra life, which is really good. So if I actually just punch through and deal lethal to a Space Marine card, it will actually die, as opposed to Acheran, who can be particularly challenging. On the flip side, Helbrecht is extremely dangerous, especially if he has rare cards or epic cards that have gotten their secondary traits, just because he can get out of hand very quickly. Because of his abilities to... Anytime a card for Helbrecht gets a kill with a melee attack, it then adds a flat passive buff to the attack stats of his entire board. And that, if you have something like a scary fear card like this one, it can take a really... Like, it can very quickly snowball and become absolutely terrifying. Let me see if I can get that kill. I can. And with that high-level fear, they're hard to remove, and you need to remove the cards that have that buff as quickly as possible so that they, again, don't snowball. So you see a lot of Big Game Hunter, you see a lot of regen, you see a lot of taunt in Helbrecht decks to really allow him to, again, snowball a little bit out of control. Use that Medicae again to try to stave him off a bit. Classic. There's every chance he's going to get that. Yeah, like, look at that melee stat. That is just insane. So he just hit me for almost 150. That'll be a flat buff to everyone, and then the follow-up attack from this guy will be even higher. Those two have not gotten the buff yet, so I need to take down... And this is actually really good for me. So I have the hitting power. I should be able to take him down in one hit, which will remove that buff. Neither of his other cards hit very hard and ranged, if at all. I'll get that debuff, so I'll be able to clear that. It's all for Helbrecht. It's all about that kind of target management and prioritizing, where you want to not feed him too many sacrificial cards because his damage will ramp up, and you want to take out the cards that are getting those benefits whenever the chance comes up. So that was good and bad. Took down the kill. It cost me my Medicae card, but that was probably worth it. 82, yikes. I do need to get these guys. I'm going to go ahead and drop this guy here so that the Shadow Seer won't die quickly to this dude. Oh, lordy. Okay. And this is another thing I wanted to highlight again. This deck is supposed to be 2.6 trophies, like 2.6k. This could easily go significantly further than that, but it looks like this player hasn't really leveled it that much. Oh god. So there goes my taunt shield. So this is what I'm talking about. This can snowball very quickly. Oh, yikes. So now he's gotten 2 kills, so he does, I think, a 30% attack bonus for all attack values for that entire board. He's got max level fear. No, rank 2 fear. Okay, good. That's still bad, but nothing compared to what it could have been. This guy, utter monster, has only dropped a handful of cards, so the only time you'll see him is if people paid for him, which, will happen. Does not have a ranged attack, which is a small mercy, but is still extremely dangerous. Hopefully I can take out both of these guys. And now my goal here, if I can take it down to 1 bodyguard and then tank his next turn, which is going to be close with this guy dropping almost 200 damage. Oh, whew, okay. So that was really good. So the Inspire card stacks with Helbrecht's ability, so you saw him doing like 220 damage. 160 is still bad, but I did manage to hit him with that range damage debuff, which will at least slow him down a little bit. So when Helbrecht drops... Inspire. Yikes, I forgot about that. Okay, so he's going to be right back up there and fairly comfortably kill my Logan Raw. Oh, especially because of that. So good. So, yeah. So those secondary traits that legendary cards got make them so much more dangerous. It is just absolutely bonkers. So this is another loss. And I did say in my kind of review of secondary traits, I do think that, melee Marines are the single most improved of every single thing. Yikes. And he's got me. He's got me very comfortably because this thing can one-shot me. 245, yeah. Helbrecht himself doesn't have the overflow damage that you get from Logan, but he does so much damage, especially himself dropping with any cards on the board that have that buff. And you have a couple really hard-hitting fear cards. So, 0 for 4. You've seen me lose all 4 games, and that's actually exactly what I wanted. So I'm going to do one more game with the Parasite, and then call it, because I don't want this video to be too long. But there are a couple things I did want to highlight, is that the decks that I'm playing with are not max level, not even close. So my Parasite deck, I'm in the 3k trophy range with, the Parasite itself has rank 1 trait, and no cards in it have a max level trait. I just wanted to be clear of that you can easily get to Terra, easily get to the top 10%, just with a little play and some luck, without having to have max level cards. And even the decks I'm playing against, if you're watching those, the vast majority of them also, I'll go ahead and do this, don't have max level cards. You see mostly trait rank 3, you see that pretty consistently. So if your cards are trait rank 3, which is that kind of laureled one here, they can hang in the upper levels of Terra. And if you do focus on your timing, so you ladder really aggressively in the 2nd and maybe 3rd week of the ladder season, you can really progress very aggressively without being at that kind of max level card. And even in the decks I've been playing against, some of them, even the ones that have beaten me pretty soundly, have had trait rank 3 or even 2 in some cases. So I just wanted to be really clear on that you shouldn't think you have to have max level cards by any means to compete in kind of the top ranked sort of ladder tiers. Ooh, that's going to hurt. Let's roll this around a bit. What's this guy out? So he's going to have reduced damage against this guy because he's not infested yet. But we may get a little cascade here. Oh, he wasn't infested yet? Man, that taunt card really saved his butt. Because if this guy had been infested already, he would have just blown up and probably taken out both of the other two. Instead, we're going to see a pretty crushing turn for me. Oh, but that should cascade. That'll kill him, which will kill him, which will hit him hard. Yeah, okay. And then killing him will do damage to the adjacent cards. And that will go through shields, which is great. He's still got 4 cards in the drop, though. I didn't play this very well. Yeah. Zagstrukk, I have been seeing him. He's still a very powerful warlord. And you can see that just with his free attacks. He's downgraded a little bit compared to some others, just because the bonus, his trait was weakened a little bit by the changes to the timing of Scout, so the attacks happen after deployment is complete. But he still gets free attacks, which is really, really good, and he's always been extremely aggressive, so with those ramping Space Marine decks, with the second dying Space Marine decks, he's gained a lot, because he still is so aggressive and is good at removing cards before they get ramped up. So you get that very aggressive alpha hit, and see I did 70 damage through his shields there, which is awesome. The beauty of the Parasite. And it's possible this isn't a total loss, but I haven't seen any of the really powerful cards I would see in a Zagstrukk deck. It is good that one's going to deploy across from my Moloch, but I don't know if he can handle one of the really scary ones. But maybe Deathblow will save me. Okay, interesting. So this has been kind of a... I'd call it a mid... Oh, you need 2.4k trophies, yeah. That's another thing about the latter season, is that the matchmaking very quickly loses faith in you. If you lose to like a 3k deck, it'll be like, alright, here's a 1.8k deck, because I'm sure that's more your speed. A little bit insulting, especially if you then proceed to lose to that deck, because it can just... It's a bad matchup, or it's an unlucky game, or whatever happens. Yeah. So I get kind of a kick out of that when that happens. But the downside of that, too, is if you're on a losing streak, you're facing weaker and weaker decks, so you're getting less and less trophies for your wins. So that progression slows down a lot. So again, if you really want to compete in the ladder aggressively, compete in week 2 or 3. Especially week 2, because that's when it's really easy to progress if slow, and week 3 is where you'll have the most reasonable matchups. In week 4, the final week of the ladder season, it just gets to be a bit of a mess, as shown here. But yeah, but you've seen some of my other ladder play. I showed off my ladder rank. All of those things to kind of, hopefully, give me some credibility in what I'm saying here. But, yeah. And the Parasite, at very high level, is actually quite powerful, but it's really slow to level because it's one of the newest Tyranid Warlords, and it just takes a while to level up a Warlord. Interesting. Let's see what happens here. So this is kind of fun. I hit hard enough that I should... I really don't. And this is where those card levels can really be impactful. Like this one, trait rank 1 is too low. This is just a very, very challenging level to play at. If I had just one more level, I should have more melee damage, enough to deal that 51. Because to have a Warlord deal 51, a melee-only Warlord, 51 damage should be easy. I do not have that. But let's go ahead and see if I can Deathblow Cascade this. So what I'm looking for is I'll do a bunch of damage to this guy on the left, almost kill the guy in the middle, and the guy on the right... Okay, good. So I'll almost kill him, I'll take the damage back, which is unfortunate, but then the Deathblow here should cascade and wipe this board. Yeah, killed both the primary and secondary, Deathblow went over there, yeah. That's the power of the Parasite. If you are successfully knocking those cards down, and especially if you're hitting the power ones early, it really makes a difference and can be really good, but it can be very challenging. Taunt is particularly powerful against the Parasite. So what I should have done, and I don't remember if I drew it, but what I should have done is played my little bomb guy first thing, because when that dies, that Deathblow does also apply the infested condition, and that would have really made a couple more impactful turns early in the beginning. At this rate, I'm probably not even going to be in the top 10%, which is okay. I am going to try one more game with Mozrog just to see it, and then we will close the video. And, hey, major props if you've stuck with me this far. You know what? No, one more with Mozrog. And another thing, too, it's too late in the season to reasonably compete with any other faction. If I look at my trophy count again, I've got my 3Ks, and then everyone else is I think I've got Space Marines at 2.5k, which could potentially come in there, but my Space Marines are low level. And then the other factions are in like the hundreds. So it would just take too long to pick any of them. But next season, I'm probably going to spice things up a little bit and change out a couple of my factions, because it looks like these ones can't really hang at this level. Oh, Badrukk, great. That is a good matchup and a bad matchup. It's good because I do have cards that are tough enough to tank hits, which is great. It is bad because he can hit so very hard. Especially with that. Yuck. Good news, though, is that I can farm a whole lot of my buffing damage here, getting my Medicae early. I should be able to punch through this. Ugh. And that was with an activation, but these cards, these bodyguards do so much damage. If he is able to drop something like Inspire, he could easily be throwing like 140 damage on primary. What's particularly frustrating about this guy is that Barrage trait can trigger Badrukk's ability. So it's entirely possible that this guy could shoot, like, say my Def Dread is high enough health to easily tank the damage, but this guy to the left is hurt enough that so let's see if it happens here. No, not even close. But the big thing I worry about with that guy is him getting additional shots. I've seen this thing get like 7 shots on a primary target and take like a 300 health card down to nothing, just because of the way that Barrage ability can trigger those additional shots, which is frustrating. This is also going to be extremely challenging because I think that I'm okay, but no. So I'm going to get wiped. Just to show here, so that drop is going to do like 130 damage. 111 is not so bad. So this guy's going to almost... I did kill him. Okay, that's actually better. Okay. Huh, that worked out okay. Still not a good position to be in, but much better than it could have been. Just to kind of break down what I was worried about there, if this left card had not gotten the kill on that card on the left, then that card would have been finished off by the Squig Buggy, which hits harder, and that Squig Buggy would have gotten an additional shot, which then would have also triggered an additional shot on my Def Dread, which may have killed him. Okay, so I still have 3 cards in the tank. One of them is Mozrog himself, and the plane is almost dead. I think I got this. And this is a 3.3k deck, so this is going to be a good win. Ah, that stupid plane. The downside, though, is that... yeah, I need to kill that. So Mozrog himself can take down Badrukk if I'm not getting too much pressure from the left. And Makari does that range debuff, which is really good. The Inspire is really helpful for what I've got left. The downside here is that Mozrog himself is going to have to waste a shot on that guy, but that's okay. I think I got this. Cool. And it may not look like it now, but that was an extremely challenging matchup, and Badrukk is a very, very dangerous combatant, and I think I've talked about that before. But this is how to beat him. Tanky cards, get lucky with your drops, and there is some luck involved. Yeah, but the biggest thing is just having cards that can take those hits, so you don't get those like runaway board wipes. This is where really powerful cards can really come into play, or really high hit point cards can really be valuable. And where higher level cards that have some sort of damage reduction or shields really come into play, and it's good to have those. But, flip side, that in the competitive ladder, that makes you vulnerable to Artemis, which we saw before. 83, nice. So that was a good win, that was a good one. We're going to do one more play with... oh, do we do Lelith? I'm going to do one more play with Lelith, because that was a particularly bad matchup I had before. But we're seeing a lot of Space Marines played, and a lot of them are running the legendary cards that have Fear. And Fear is really good in a matchup against, say, Badrukk. So Acheran and Badrukk have been a lot less common in this last ladder season. Sorry, where'd you go? Because of some of the changes I'm seeing that are also holding back my decks. And it's cool to see the meta shaken up that much. It still feels very competitive. I did get to the top 6% and could have just stopped, and then would have stayed there and gotten the rewards, but I wanted to keep playing, especially... oh, okay. This could be a good matchup. That's a really high card count avatar, which is usually good. The high card count makes it very likely that there's nothing super scary in there, but we're going to find out in a minute. Okay. And so far, we'll see how this goes. Okay. That's good and bad. So I'm seeing pretty much across the board low-cost cards, which means that that higher card count could be hiding something really scary in the middle. These guys are all fairly cheap, so you can still have them as filler in a deck that has, say, a Incarn, the massive monstrosity that now is endless. If that shows up, I'm just going to kind of have to ignore it as best I can. It's interesting to see the Dire Avenger in here, because he has almost no melee attack. And so I'd usually expect him... I wouldn't expect him in a melee-heavy Avatar deck, but he does have a melee attack, and he has the attack on drop, which is pretty good. He's a really kind of powerful flex card. He just doesn't get a benefit from the Avatar's ability. But that's not always reason not to run it. Tough call. I want both of those to have a little more health. And I usually try to play my Life Thief healer at least twice. If I get it more than that, that's a bonus. But he doesn't have that high of attack stats to where he can redeploy easily, and having him hold down the Shadow Seer is good. What else we got here? I'm doing a decent job. I'm going to do this. Just in case something nasty happens. I don't want to just... No, that's fine. Okay, so this is someone that probably played up that high early in the season. I'm still seeing a lot of drops that are somewhat odd and very shooter, very ranged attack heavy, which is kind of a weird choice. Now, shields in this case are a really good call, because a shielded card in an Avatar deck can really build up a lot of melee attack. Assuming it has a melee attack, so this was a good choice to do the Shadow Seer. So usually its melee attack isn't very impressive. It's sitting at 60, which is actually pretty scary. So I want to take down those shields and actually kill it fairly quickly. This was a really good matchup, but he is less rated than I am, so again, you saw me take a pretty crushing loss, and then I'm going to win this, I'm fairly certain. I still have all my power cards left in the deck with at least one redeploy each, and my reshielded Shadow Seer. So it's pretty unlikely this guy's going to take me down, no matter what else is in the deck. Because I've also seen some cards in the teens and in the 20s, so he doesn't have anything too expensive hiding in the wings. Yeah. So he's only got one more surprise card in there, and then the Avatar himself. I do need to be a little bit cautious, because one-on-one the Avatar will comfortably kick the tar out of Lelith. So I don't want Lelith on the table unless I have a kill shot. Which, since again I have my fully shielded Shadow Seer, should be okay. So he's running a ranged deck with the Avatar, which is... It's not the craziest thing, because Eldar are generally better at shooting. They've got some extremely powerful ranged shooting cards. And he's got ones that have fear, high health, shields, and all have some form of melee attack, so they can benefit from the Avatar's ability, but they'll be a little bit slower to ramp up, as opposed to some of the scary melee cards, like that one. Wow, okay. And he's got that rank 4 death blow, which that's... scary. But... Ooh, that was close. This still is not particularly frightening. Even if I lose my Crimson Hunter, I still have my Solitaire, and I also have Morgan Ra in here to do some additional damage, additional range damage. And these guys are pretty much dead. And I'm about to get my Life Thief back. And that will pull the Avatar himself. Ooh. The good thing about this, though, is I have so much ranged on the table that I can go ahead and bet on this. And be fairly sure that he is not going to want to use ranged attacks. And if he does, I'll hit him back harder than he hits me. The reason that matters is because if I want to keep my Crimson Hunter alive for another turn, I'm going to need this guy not to shoot me. With 40 melee, let's see how good my healer is. I think he started with enough health that the heal should put me over 40. Yeah, so that's with Inspire. Okay. Nice. Okay, so even if he does melee, my Crimson Hunter will live, but if he does ranged... nuts. Well, that's unfortunate. That's exactly what we were hoping would not happen. Okay, what else we got in here? Ooh. And so this guy has 163 melee, which will not kill my Solitaire. So his Furious Charge should kill the enemy Solitaire. It's going to hurt real hard. Oh, actually, that may kill me. Yeah, okay. I misjudged that. I forgot that he had rank 4, so it wasn't dealing just his melee attack. It was dealing 120% of its melee attack value. So that was bad calculation on my part. Just do that. And this is exactly what I don't want. 157 with a small melee bonus. So I'm going to take some of that away with the outflank. He may have gotten me. And that was my fault. That was a bad play. That wasn't a bad matchup or anything. I had this match and I just lost it. Maybe. I may still have it, because he's not going to kill me. And I'll hit him pretty hard back in melee, and I've got a fully charged melee attack. Morgan Ra has melee, so I may actually be able to pull this out. I hope. Fingers crossed. Let's do the math. I got it. Sweet. Okay. Woo! That's close. But, so that was a bad call on my part, losing my Solitaire. There's no reason I needed to do that, and that should have comfortably let me win the game, because I could have moved the Shadowseer to be over on that side, and still even taken out that Solitaire, but kept mine alive. So, got that win. Sweet. But I only got 46 victory points in return for that, because that deck was lower ranked than mine. So we saw where I started in this video, and then we'll see where I end up here. 170. So I think I'm in the top 15%. Now, this is a point where I've slid from the top 6% straight down to the top 15. I'm fairly comfortably in the top 15%. I'm just a hair away from the top 10. I may still play a little more just to get my kill packs, but I don't want to fall too much further, so I may go ahead and stop for the season. And that's why you don't play in the final week, unless you have extremely powerful decks with max level cards, or you have 1 or 2 decks that can really, really power through. But yeah, so I hope you enjoyed that ladder update. It would be pretty funny to watch my first ladder game, which I think was in week 2, and then compare to this one where I'm just getting my butt kicked, just to see how the ladder progresses throughout the month. But yeah, hope this was helpful. Good luck out there, and yeah, Merry Christmas.